All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will continue talking about the last days of Bruce Lee. Lots of gems, lots of belt buckle knives, lots of, I'm out here bowling with Bruce Lee, baby. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Sifu. I'm on like 6 minutes of sleep. 6 minutes Dougie Fresh.
6 minutes, Dougie Fresh. That's like 4 minutes more than you normally get.
You know, it was 6.5 minutes, like 10 minutes ago.
I mean, it
Well,
feels like more like 6 minutes.
I was going to stop trying to leverage more sympathy from us. We don't care.
Leverage more sympathy.
So here we are, Dre.
Right.
We are not in part 1.
Oh,
not in part 2.
But
we are in part 3 of Bruce Lee's final year, meaning the year of 73, not the final 12 months, basically the final more or less 7 months of his life.
Oh, yeah.
A very tumultuous time in the life of the late great. Just to recap,
Wild.
not to be too repetitive, I got this timeline off of a great blog, popcultmaster.com.
Oh,
so you guys can go to it. Pop Cult Master. It's on there. It has the final days of Bruce Lee, and everything's in a timeline. I checked it out to make sure that it was legit, cross-referencing it with other books and notes and things. And on top of that,
Too legit to quit.
I had spliced in the drug letters, because the drug letters all had dates. Although we are now in June, and spoiler alert, Bruce Lee dies in July.
No.
So if every episode was like like you had this little marker at the bottom, like we started episode 1, we're like this far away from his death.
Oh yeah.
And now we're like here. So we're really getting to those final weeks where things get really crazy.
Yeah. And it's like more like every day there was something crazy.
Every day there was something crazy, whether it was health stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting is how much health stuff and how much legal stuff was going on in those final days, which really makes us understand that, although career-wise, because he had just finally made his big movie with Warner Brothers, and he was just right on the cusp of stardom, international, and certainly in the U.S.
Oh, man.
Behind the scenes, personally, it was a very rough time for him. So we could say, it doesn't take a great detective to kind of go through these things that he was going through towards the end of his life and say that Bruce Lee's final months weren't filled with like joy and happiness.
Right.
There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of, issues going on with, people like Lo Wei and Raymond Chow, and Bruce's honeymoon period with the Hong Kong press had already ended, which just shows you how typical the press cycle is. It's like, once you're the new thing, the press loves you. They build you up. And then at some point they start picking away, and then they're at you, right?
And tear you down.
Bruce, made it big with Big Boss towards the end of 71, again going into 72. And suddenly he's a huge star. And now by 73, they're talking all sorts of shit about him. So it wasn't a very long cycle, all right, before they're starting to pick at him for the affairs. And then in part 1, we talked about that article where they said, they quoted Yip Chun saying that Bruce saw Bruce Lee get knocked down, and Bruce got really pissed off about that and stuff. And so it's unfortunate, because the movie that he had just finished making in around April of 73 would be the one that would catapult him to international stardom. If you did not know about Bruce Lee before Enter the Dragon, the Dragon was the thing that was going to make you know who Bruce Lee was. Oof. And unfortunately, he did not live to see it. He had, not to jump ahead, but, at the time of his death, he had seen a cut of Enter the Dragon while he was in LA visiting, when he was going to get himself checked out from the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And that version of Enter the Dragon did not yet have the score by Lalo Schifrin. So, the whole Bruce Lee never actually heard that. And the music, not like Bruce Lee didn't make that movie electric, but the music is one of the things that's so tied to it. And
it's like the broth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you almost can't really imagine Enter the Dragon without Lalo Schifrin's incredible soundtrack. Brilliant. By the way, I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I have a cousin on the Cuban side, bit of a baller. Knows Lalo Schifrin, or had met Lalo Schifrin, and was at Lalo Schifrin's place a number of years ago. And Lalo played the Enter the Dragon theme for him on a piano.
On a
piano, played
on a
it for him.
grand.
Yeah, so just imagine.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? Having the man himself.
You were there for this.
I wasn't there.
Oh,
For
I was
it.
about
Otherwise,
to
I would
say.
say I was there and heard it. My cousin, Dre, all right?
Sheesh.
Yes. I love Mikey. You see, this is how everything that I teach at City Wing
I know,
Chun gets twisted.
yeah.
I tell something very clear, and they're like, yo,
Wait.
Sibu said he
Wait.
learned this from Yip Man. All right. No, I
That's how it
said I
goes.
saw a photo
Yeah.
of Yip Man.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Right.
This is, you can see in live time how
Love it.
the sausage of
Gets
misinformation
telephoned.
is made.
I'd like to point out as well that he's told that story repeatedly.
Yeah,
This isn't the
I've at
first time,
least
second
told that 3 times on the podcast.
Yes,
Keep telling it.
Yeah. And but that, well, you know,
Great.
it's great because one, we always have new subscribers who haven't heard the
Right.
old stuff, because we constantly get comments where people are like, hey, could you do a video on? And it's like, we did it in season 1, we did it in season 2,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of times the new subscribers, they don't go back and listen to the old stuff. By the way, on the Kung Fu Genius channel, we have all the seasons, which are basically year 1, year 2, year 3, on playlists. So you can go back and listen to them in order. You can, you know, with the playlists on YouTube, you can have them go on autoplay, so you can just listen to them in your car or whatever. Yeah. So you can go back and listen to the less, I mean, look at the refined production we have now and how far we've come.
Yes.
And then you
Come
can
so
hear
far.
our really unrefined early days of the
Yes.
Kung Fu Genius podcast.
When it was
The glory days.
clear that Dre still had early onset Alzheimer's.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's a great thing. I could repeat the stories because we have a whole group of new subscribers who haven't heard them, and Dre forgets them after a minute.
That's my superpower. though. I love my superpower.
That's right. So before we get started, just want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius is on Patreon. Patreon.com/the Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to episodes early. Higher tiers of support give you all sorts of goodies, including subscriber reels and all sorts of other fun stuff. You can also support us here on YouTube with YouTube memberships. And I'm going to start doing more membership-only videos at like the 3rd tier. Stuff like, you know, stuff that I won't normally talk about on the podcast because maybe it's not for general public consumption, you know, seedy, salacious stuff about Dre's private life or whatever.
Yeah,
so
we-
here we go. So
we have to keep that in the,
yeah, at least they got to pay for it,
different-
right?
yeah.
Yes. So anyway, reading off of this timeline, and just a reminder, the timeline has the facts and the dates on a timeline. But as I've said multiple times already, the problem with history and historical method is not just gathering the data and the facts. You know, Wednesday, June 13th, 1973, this happened. Those are the easy things because you can get that from newspapers. You can get that from notes, right? So we can put those things into a timeline and really call those facts. Where history gets a little murky, and this is what historians have to work on when they are
this is why the
writing
job is
history.
so tough.
Why the job is so tough, is in the interpretation of that data. All right, because you may know, okay, Bruce Lee called so and so on this day, and you know, maybe I'm just making up a hypothetical. He called Run Run Shaw, you know, a week before Bruce Lee died, right? And that phone call could have just been like, hey, we're gonna have a meeting on this day. We're gonna discuss a project. But if you didn't know what they talked about, people say like, oh, this was him jumping ship to Run Shaw, where maybe he just called them because they were going to have a meeting about potentially working together. But people go, no, see, he was going to jump ship and that was it. But you don't know yet because that is the part that's interpreted.
Okay.
And people have a lot of high confidence in their interpretation. There is some stuff in this timeline where I don't know the writer's name because his website's just Pop Cult Master.
Okay.
Where he'll have facts and data, but then I'll see like interpolations of his own interpretation of what it is. And there we have to go, well, how do you know that that's actually what's going on? Also, there tends to be some bleakerisms in here.
Quick question.
Yes.
Pop Cult data.
Pop Cult Master.
Pop Cult Master.
Yes.
His data is based on all pop culture?
No.
Or just
No. It's a blog article.
Mhm.
It's like the final months of Bruce Lee, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
And it just has, like, I'm reading his blog post with the drug letters put in there, and some additional notes I have to kind of complete his timeline.
But he's not going over stuff like Milli Vanilli and that.
No.
Just
the blog article is called "The Final Days of Bruce Lee,"
right?
Which would mean the final months in '73, which would normally exclude topics like Milli Vanilli.
So a quick question for you, Dre.
Yeah.
Have you been listening to Milli Vanilli? Because it just strikes me that like you really were just so desperate to shoehorn
I'm curious if he has.
Dre always talks about what he saw last on TV.
I'm just curious if he has another blog post about other pop culture events.
But this may strike you as, this may come to you as a surprise. I'm mostly concerned with Bruce Lee stuff. Okay. So if he had like an 80-page deep dive into Johnny Cash, I wouldn't know it because no disrespect to the great late Johnny Cash, it's not my wheelhouse. Okay. So what you can do after this episode is you can go to that website and see what else he has up on there. All right.
That's like kind of taken into account that he actually knows how to use the internet, to be fair. So.
So here we go. We left off the last entry, I think, that we finished off in part 2 was Thursday, June 7th. All right. So we're already in June. Bruce Lee dies July 20th. So think of that timeline getting shorter and shorter, closer to the day that he dies. And the last entry, just to recap, talked a little bit about Bruce repeating himself a lot to people that he knew, like Maria Yee, Bob Wall. He would kind of tell the same story over and over again. Kind of like I do, but I do it on purpose just because you don't remember it, not because I forgot it. And also, I remember reading something. I believe that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar also mentioned the same thing, that he once got a late night phone call from Bruce Lee. And during this phone call, Bruce was like kind of rambling on and repeating and that kind of stuff, right? Reminds me a lot of when my former teacher, Leung would call me at 3 a.m. Yeah. Because of course there's a 12-hour time difference between Hong Kong and New York. Right. And so I remember one time I got a phone call at like 3 a.m., which meant it was 3 p.m. in Hong Kong. Okay. And I saw it was, Leung calling me, right? And I'm like, oh, gee, like something, when you get a phone call from, one of the most famous Wing Chun guys at 3 a.m., you're like, oh my God, what happened? So I called and I'm like, hello, Sigong, is everything okay? And he's like, yes. And then he just starts prattling off like into this like super irrelevant thing about some Wing Chun politics that's going on in Europe. Okay. And I'm like, and he wants me to like find out something for him, you know, because he maybe similar to you, doesn't know how to use the internet. He doesn't. So he needs me to like look up stuff for him. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh, and he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yes, going. It's 3 a.m. And I remember he goes, okay, never mind. And then just kept talking. So his response to me telling him that it was 3 a.m. In New York was, okay, never mind. And then he just kept talking.
Never mind that it's 3 a.m.
Yeah. It's like, never, like he's basically saying, I don't care. I need to tell you this, right? So I not that Bruce Lee was kind of as absent-minded as Leung can be in those kind of moments, but it every time I think of like Bruce Lee calling Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at like, some weird time because of the 12-hour time difference is going on and on, it reminds me of those weird late night phone calls from Siva Leung. So anyway.
So what if you could transport back in time for a front row seat into the life and legacy of one of the most respected Wing Chun masters in history? Gong Sao Wong, a tribute direct students on Siva Wong So Leung, offers you just that. Through a series of exclusive conversations, 25 direct students share anecdotes, reflections, and personal stories offering in-depth understanding of the man behind the legend. Order your copy today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping. I absolutely love this book, and I think you'll find it an indispensable part of your collection. I can't recommend it enough. Get yours today. Go to Amazon, type in Gong Sao Wong, and there you go.
Wednesday, June 13th, 1973. Okay, so according to the blog, and again, not to be repetitive, I'll read what the blog says straight through, and then I'll talk about what I think is an interpolation, him adding his own idea and what we might know and what we can't know, okay? The Hong Kong press reported that Lee wasn't happy about Lo Wei making a movie in Bangkok with Dragon in the title. So Lee tried to legally trademark the word, since his name in Chinese, Lei Xiulong, translates as Lee the Little Dragon. Lo was supposed to have changed the title as a result of Bruce's outburst, But the movie came out in December. So later that year, this would mean after Bruce Lee's death, with Dragon still being in the English title. It was called The Tattooed Dragon. And in the Chinese title, Dragon, Tiger, Gold, Just. That's why they always have it. That's a literal translation of the Chinese title into English. That's why they always have an alternate English title, because oftentimes the Chinese title doesn't really translate one-to-one into English. Likewise, the aforementioned Chinese Godfather was released in Chinese as The Big Scaled Dragon. As much as Bruce Lee would have liked to have threatened Lo Wei in person, he couldn't. From mid-May to early July, Lo was directing Jimmy Wang Yu in Thailand. Jimmy's character was called Yi Chaolong. Don't know why that's relevant. Maybe because it has some resemblance to some of the, because Long could also be dragon. So they're giving Jimmy Wang Yu's character has dragon in the title. You know what I mean? This is Lo Wei kind of getting back at Bruce Lee. And back to June 13th, Lee received a telegram from Ted Ashley about Blood and Steel no longer being the title for what will henceforth be known as Enter the Dragon. So there's a lot to unpack there. Really, really cool stuff. So first of all, Bruce Lee trying to legally trademark Dragon. Dragon is one of the most common Chinese characters.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would be able to trademark a word that, you know, I mean, dragon is not a word we say in English all the time. But dragon, because of the Chinese zodiac, it being the only mythical beast in the 12 Chinese zodiac, because when you look at the Chinese zodiac, all of the animals are real animals, you know, rabbit, tiger. There's only one that's mythical. That's the dragon.
Right.
Okay. And so as a result, dragon and, you know, Long Ma Jing Sun, like, you know, have the spirit of a horse and a dragon. Like, these are things that you say. Like, the word dragon is much more commonly used in Chinese. Also, lots of businesses may have dragon in the title, so on and so forth. So the idea that Bruce could like trademark dragon, I don't know. Also, I don't know where that bit of information came from. I could totally see Bruce Lee being upset with Lo Wei that, you know, because Bruce made.
He was often upset with Lo Wei.
Yeah, I mean, he made 2 movies with Lo Wei. Those were his first 2 contract films, The Big Boss and Fist of Fury. And then once his contract was fulfilled, he signed a new contract with Raymond, but this time as a partnership with his own company, Concord Film Productions. And it was a 50-50 partnership with Raymond Chow. So the idea was that he was no longer going to be forced to make movies with whoever Raymond Chow wanted to direct them. Bruce was now going to be in charge of all the creative stuff. That was Bruce's half. And Raymond was going to be in charge of like the distribution and the business end of things, right? But now, once Bruce no longer was under the clutches of Lo Wei, then we slowly start to hear how displeased he was with Lo Wei.
Okay.
And there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, that's not really relevant to this, because that happened like a year earlier. But, you know, for people who are maybe not fully aware of that, if you want, I can do a video on the whole Lo Wei Bruce Lee stuff, why they didn't like each other. But suffice to say, Bruce Lee and Lo Wei did not like each other. So if we're just sticking to the topic of this video, just understand these 2 dudes, it was like Drake and Kendrick, all right? In terms of the animosity, all right? But not in terms of matching either or 2 of them with talents, all right? Because Lo Wei, sorry to say, was a bit of a hack, all right?
Oh, no.
So anyway, so that's it. So I can understand Bruce being upset about Lo Wei using dragon in the title, or maybe giving Jimmy Wang Yu, whom Bruce Lee also did not like, his character had dragon in his name, you know, as Bruce Lee did Pang Long in Way of the Dragon, so on and so forth. But the idea that Bruce would be able to trademark that, I think, is kind of preposterous, right? So because it's one thing to trademark a logo, it's one thing to trademark an image, but to just trademark a single word, you could perhaps trademark or get a service mark on a phrase, like or a catchphrase like "just do it" for Nike,
right?
All right, but you could not get like a trademark
Sneaker.
on "just." You know what I mean? Like, because that would be kind of ridiculous. And I know it's I don't know what the laws were back then, but I can't imagine that you could simply trademark a commonly used word. So it's understandable why Bruce would be upset, and perhaps even a little more upset because it's Jimmy Wang Yu, whom I consider the David Carradine of Hong Kong cinema. All right. And or would you say Jimmy Wang Yu? And I don't care.
I don't
all right?
care.
And then also in that movie, that Tattooed Dragon, was not just Jimmy Wang Yu, but also one of Bruce Lee's close friends, a pop singer who was also an actor. His name is Sam Hoy. Sam Hoy is actually still alive today. Sam Hoy is kind of considered. It's difficult to have a comparison because Canto pop, which is Cantonese pop music, it is very different from like American and
Or
British
K-pop.
pop music.
C
right?
pop.
Well, that's a new thing. C-pop?
C pop.
You mean
Canto
Canto
pop.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Canto pop, it's a term that came out a little bit later, but I just mean Cantonese popular music in general
Mhm.
didn't quite have the variety of like, let's say,
Mm.
music here in the States or in Europe. You know, most Cantonese pop songs tended to be love songs, ballads.
Mhm.
And the more upbeat stuff, I think, became a little more prevalent in the 90s. I mean, not that there weren't any upbeat songs, but Sam Hoy is kind of like one of the original legends of Cantonese
I'm sure
pop.
I've heard some C pop in some karaoke spots.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's
So Sam Hoy is kind of like a legend. And he still performs nowadays, although he had a bit of an
Wow.
accident. He had a bit of an accident.
it's
a few
like Mick
years ago.
Jagger.
Yeah, he had an accident a few years ago where he was like, I think he was hiking and he was in a very high elevation and he couldn't get down in time. And then he, you know, when you're up there, the oxygen is really thin.
Yeah.
He had some kind of accident, something related to that.
Hmm.
But he's still around. And according to some other notes, Bruce Lee used to train Sam Hoy in some Jeet Kune Do in Hong Kong.
Oh wow.
So as we've talked about many times before, people want to know what were Bruce's thoughts on Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do during this final Hong Kong period. And I always kind of thought, well, at this time period, he was 100% focused on making movies.
Mhm.
So I don't think the idea of like the improvements to the JKD straight lead or the relevance of Paksao or Lapsao in JKD, I don't think these were things that were like top of mind for him because he really wasn't teaching anyone at this time. He was training,
Mhm.
mainly, you know, doing physical fitness training to make sure that he looked good in front of the camera, still doing his bag work, running, you know, all his martial arts stuff. Like when Mikey and I went and had dinner with Sifu Wan Kam Leung in Hong Kong last year, he talked about going over to Bruce's Kowloon Tong home and just seeing that Bruce had all of these unique training devices that were made for him, things to train his speed and reaction time, different types of things to punch and move and
Yeah.
things like that, right? So Bruce was still training like a maniac, and Bruce was still improving himself physically and his attributes as a martial artist, but it's pretty clear he wasn't really teaching Jeet Kune Do at this time. He was a movie star.
Okay.
But he did teach Sam Hoy like some kicks and punches, I think just because Sam Hoy was a singer who was getting into acting.
All right.
He wanted to have some martial arts skills in case he was going to do like a martial arts role. And Sam Hoy's wife, Rebecca Hoy, was very close to Linda Lee. That was like Linda Lee's main girlfriend at the time.
Oh.
Yeah. And you can even see at
They were
Bruce Lee-
homies.
yeah, you can even see at Bruce Lee's funeral that like Rebecca was there with Linda and stuff. So they were very close. And I believe, although I may be wrong on this, I believe she was Filipina, but I don't know. But so anyway, so
Shout
there
out to the
was a close
Philippines.
connection. So anyway, Sam Hoy is in this Jimmy Wang Yu movie that has dragon in the title.
Man.
So I mean, you know, it's like one of Bruce's boys is in it too. So I mean, like, how mad is it, right?
Mm.
And then at the very end, he gets. They talked about the telegram from Ted Ashley, who was their lawyer in the States. By the way, spoiler alert: the last letter Bruce Lee ever wrote
Was
on
to
the day of his
Ted.
death was to Ted Ashley. Although there are
Oh.
some people that speculate that letter was not, in fact, written by Bruce Lee. They think it was written perhaps because it's typed up. They think it's written perhaps by Linda.
Secretary.
No,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
by Linda or someone else, right? But I don't know. I think it had Bruce's signature on there.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I mean, not that that would be a huge conspiracy, you know.
Right.
I don't know what the arguments for or against that being not real. Or is it like people. I mean, when the drug letters came out, I mean, I even had good friends of mine who were telling me, "Oh no, you can see that they're totally fake," and it's like. When people have a narrative, they don't want to believe certain things about
course
Bruce
not.
Lee. Of course, then you're always going to view it through that lens, right? But you know, when the day I found out about the drug letters, that was a hard day for me because I knew Bruce was like a regular
Ooh.
cannabis user. And for me, it wasn't like, oh no, Bruce is a bad guy. It was just like I didn't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And Bruce Lee's biographers, John Little, Matt Pauly, so many of the biographers were trying to put together what was going on during this time. The weight loss, all the different health problems, the erratic behavior, the anger,
Mhm.
like his jitteriness, all these different kind of things. And then the
And then,
moment you
yeah.
put cocaine in the mix, you go,
Oh.
okay. Right. And then it was like this huge drop of like, oh, this totally makes sense now.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that he got a telegram from Ted Ashley that they were, because originally Enter the Dragon was going to be called Blood and Steel.
Yeah.
Which
Which would
is a
have
shitty
been
title. Jesus Christ. And then
in the
they
world?
changed it to Enter the Dragon.
Okay.
All right. Now, some people don't know Enter the Dragon was originally Bruce's title for what later became Way of the Dragon.
Mm.
So when you look at Bruce's notes for Way of the Dragon, where he fights Chuck Norris at the end, the Chinese title is Mang Long Guo Gong. Mang Long Guo Gong means the fierce dragon crosses the sea. So you see what I mean? Like, you can't translate that Chinese title into English directly because Mang Long Guo Gong is a Chinese idiom. It's a saying.
Mhm.
All right. And it's kind of a poetic type thing because the Chinese in general did not like to leave China because China was the motherland. And so they said that any Chinese who would dare to leave China and go to another country must have been a fierce dragon. So because they have like another one is like Mhai Mang Long Mhai Guo Gong, which is if he were not a fierce dragon, he would not have crossed the sea. So that's kind of the corollary to that, right? So the saying is just like, the fierce dragon crosses the sea, and then kind of the subtext is if he were not, I mean, I'm not saying for the title, I mean in what the phrase means.
Right.
If he were not a fierce dragon, he would not have crossed the sea, because the Chinese, especially at that time, never wanted to leave China.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the title. So because Bruce's character, Tang Long, leaves Hong Kong and goes to Italy. So he is the fierce dragon that crosses the sea, so to speak. And that's why in the beginning there, where you see that kind of cartoon opening, it's like it's the dragon going, whoa, and it's crossing the sea, because that's the Chinese title. And in Bruce's notes, that film was originally going to be called Enter the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
But then he decided to hold that title for something else. And then they changed it to Way of the Dragon for the Chinese release. Of course, later it got called Return of the Dragon. That was when it was released on VHS.
I had a 20-minute argument with this guy at Bill's, and we were talking. He was like, "No, Return of the Dragon was part 2 of Enter the Dragon."
Yeah.
You blah, blah, blah.
That is what you call an ignoramus.
I was
right?
like, no.
Yeah,
no
they
part
don't
2
know.
of-
It's because in the States, Bruce Lee only made a couple movies.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they finally, it was VHS that gave Bruce Lee the second boom in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Because before that, you could only watch the movies in the movie theater. So when this stuff came out on VHS, then they had a 4-pack. They called The Big Boss. They called that Fists of Fury.
Yeah.
They called Fist of Fury, The Chinese Connection.
Right.
Then they called Way of the Dragon, Return of the Dragon, to make it seem like it was some kind of sequel to Enter the Dragon. And then I think they had Game of Death in there. I think it was a 4-pack. The awful 78 Game of Death.
Right.
And and that caused a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
I still Charles Damiano, one of my good friends, Bruce Lee collector.
Yeah.
I love him to
Shout
death.
out to
He
Charles.
still calls it Return of the Dragon.
Oh man.
Every time he said, for me, that is like fingernails on a chalkboard, because it's not the original title. It's not the Chinese title. And now all the film fans call it by its proper title. And one time I kind of called him on that. I'm like, it's Way of the Dragon, right? And then he said, no, Way of the Dragon is just he called it the overseas title for that movie. And I'm like, America is overseas from where the movie was made. You know what I mean? Because like it's a very like America-centric view. It's like, no, the overseas title, the international.
Overseas.
That's what the movie was called, right? And there's this kind of thing like, no, what it's called in America is no one calls it Return of the Dragon. And no one except Charles Damiano,
Yeah.
good friend of mine.
And the
huge
guy I
Bruce-
was arguing with.
and that
He
idiot
calls
you
it-
were arguing with.
Yeah.
But Charles makes a conscious decision to call it that. I think the guy you were arguing with is just an ignoramus.
Yeah.
And so, so that's always like one of the sticking points. Anyway, so he saved Enter the Dragon for future use, and then that eventually got used for his final movie, which thank God they didn't call it Blood and Steel. Jesus Christ.
Woo.
All right, so here we go.
That
Now
would've
we
been
go.
terrible.
Now we're gonna jump almost a couple weeks here. Thursday, June 28th.
Ooh.
This was the
less
second.
than a month.
Yeah, this was the second anniversary when Bruce signed his Golden Harvest contract, with Bob Baker serving as his witness. Despite Lee assuring Raymond Chow that he is still a Golden Harvest affiliate by making daily visits to the set of Taekwondo Heroes, which Ray spearheaded at Lee's suggestion of making a star out of Junri, Ray is aghast when reading an issue of the China Mail, which states that Lee has scooped a per annum salary for Warner Brothers. I suppose from Warner Brothers. What prompted Bruce's desire to boastfully reveal the news scoop was that the Wednesday Variety review of The Big Boss, where the reviewer noted the mindlessness of it. Whether Lee learned about the review via his younger brother phoning or faxing, since Robert was studying in the U.S., remains to be seen. So there's two paragraphs here for June 28th, but let's first just unpack that a little bit. So the second anniversary of Bruce signing his Golden Harvest contract, because, by the way, when you come on the ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu tour with the Kung Fu Genius, which will be next month.
Mikey's coming?
Yep. One of the places that I take the tour on, actually on day one, we do a walking tour of Yau Ma Tei, Jordan, and Tim Sa Choi, is we walk by the building where Bruce Lee signed his first contract. Now, that building doesn't exist. The same building doesn't exist anymore. It is like everything else in Hong Kong.
A mall.
A mall, right? Everything is a mall, right? Okay, so it's always weird. Like, here's a famous place where Bruce Lee once did blah, blah, blah.
Right.
This is not the building anymore. It is now a mall. Here's the place where Bruce Lee won. It is now a mall. All right. Here's the place where they filmed. It is now a mall.
I
All right.
missed that day, the mall tour.
No, I remember very distinctly because we were very close to it when we came to Hong Kong. I pointed it out to you.
No, I'm saying I might miss it this time around.
Oh, this time.
Because
Yeah,
I'm
that's fine.
going to be getting there like night.
That's fine. That's fine. I can show you one another day.
Yeah.
All right. It's called The One now. It's a mall called The One.
We've been to the one.
Yes, we have been to The One.
Is that the one with the big Timberland boot?
Yes. All right. And that mall used to be an office building, and that's where the original Golden Harvest office was. By the way, that's also the office which Bob Baker was sending all the cocaine to. That was the spot right there on Nathan Road, right?
No wonder we kept singing that song. It feels good.
That's right. That's right.
Singing it over and over in that mall.
No, that wasn't that mall.
That wasn't the same mall?
No. You're thinking of
Ooh.
K11. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, now I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's a great mall. I mean, I'm not a mall guy. All right. Like I like mom and pop shops and stuff like that, but they're fewer and fewer between. But Hong Kong has really good malls.
They
like
do.
K11's a great mall.
Yeah, because it's an art mall. They have like all sorts of displays there. And also the thing about Hong Kong malls is they have these off the chart food courts.
Oh yeah.
So you go to a mall to eat because they have like
we had
these
that dessert.
amazing food courts, desserts, all sorts of stuff, right? It's weird because I never go to the malls here in the US. But in Hong Kong, one, you're outside, it's hot as balls. You go to a mall because it's like air conditioned.
First of all,
and
the mall we have here in New York City is ass.
total ass. Yes.
It's
Yes.
one mall that we always
and
had.
they're also massive. You just I got lost in a mall. I mean, look, we got off the train and got lost in the mall when we got off the train after getting
That's
off
right.
the plane.
That's right.
Couldn't
Okay.
find our way out.
Right.
So so anyway, it's the second anniversary, June 28th, 1973, which meant he signed it, I guess, around June 28th, 1971. That original contract was for 2 films, which became Big Boss and Fist of Fury. $15,000, by the way. That was the total contract. So he basically got paid $7,500 a film. And to make those 2 movies with Golden Harvest.
It had to be, what, 80K
Yeah.
back then? Felt like?
Yeah, but it still, I don't think, was a lot of money.
No.
And so they, mentioned here that he was now going to get a per annum salary from Warner Brothers, which made sense. He just made Enter the Dragon. I think when they looked at Enter the Dragon, they were probably
good.
pretty confident that
Yeah.
this movie was going to do well. And then, and remember, people always forget, I mentioned this in the first one, Bruce's ultimate goal was to go back to the U.S. It wasn't to stay in Hong Kong and be the king of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong thing was just to make some movies, get some momentum, and then go back to the States.
Which
that was the whole
probably
plan.
would have happened.
Probably would have happened.
Yeah.
He might have done the Jackie Chan thing for a few years, which is like make one movie in Hong Kong, make one movie in the States. But I don't think he wanted to stay in Hong Kong. I also think that Bruce also felt he was a little too big for it. But it does mention here that he got a little miffed about the review of Big Boss. Interesting thing about Big Boss, which I think is probably the weakest of all the Bruce Lee films, although it was a huge success when it first came out, just because he was awesome. But he was awesome. The script was right. And the rest of the movie was And when Bruce wasn't kicking someone's ass, and he doesn't start kicking ass until more than halfway through the movie, the movie's a little bit of a slog, right? But the moment he starts doing stuff, everyone's like, wow, right? From what I've read, I don't know, maybe people on the YouTube comments can correct me on this. Bruce didn't really want Big Boss to have international distribution, because I think Bruce also felt Big Boss was kind of weak, and he didn't want that to be the film that they would see internationally. Certainly Enter the Dragon. Perhaps also Way of the Dragon, although I did read some things that he didn't quite want. He didn't think Way of the Dragon was quite there for Western audiences. Maybe he didn't think they would understand the humor. Which in the English translation of the English dub, the humor is pretty much all missing, because the joke is he's a fish out of water. He speaks Chinese and he's in Italy, and everyone is either speaking Italian or English. So he's always going like, tell him. But when the thing is dubbed in English,
so strange.
He's like, they're all speaking English, like, tell him. It's like, I remember as a kid going, dude, you're in front of him. Why don't you just tell him yourself? All that stuff goes away, right?
You know what's strange about Big Boss? I remember watching it with my boys back in the 90s or whatever. And we were just, yo, that's Hennessy? That's how, like in the one scene where he's drunk
at the brothel.
Like, what the?
By the way, I just did an interview with Stripey Rambles.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee YouTuber. And he said in the latest Arrow re-release of Big Boss, where it's like remastered, everything looks good, they have a substantial amount of additional footage, which includes the full brothel scene and a few other scenes in there as well. So I got to catch that, because there's more Bruce Lee to be seen that wasn't in the original cut. Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius. Fans and practitioners all know that the wooden dummy is the most coveted tool in Wing Chun, and now you can learn all about it in my cleverly titled book, The Wooden Dummy. I wrote this guide with you, the practitioner, in mind. Rather than mystifying any of the concepts or hiding so-called secrets, I've laid it all out in meticulous detail. The book is contextualized for practitioners of any lineage of the art, not just those who come from WT. Over 300 pages in length, The Wooden Dummy breaks down every aspect from the form, both technical, historical, theoretical details, and it makes it the perfect companion for anyone who's learning the wooden dummy techniques. I've even sweetened the deal for you. If you want to get a copy of this book signed by me, just use the coupon code SIGNATURE when you purchase the unsigned copy, and you will get the signed copy at no additional cost. So go to the link below, or go to citywingchun.com/shop. Look up the Wooden Dummy book. Don't miss your chance. This is definitely one of the best books I've ever written on the Wooden Dummy, and I hope you'll find it's the best book ever written on the Wooden Dummy. Get yours today. Check it out. So anyway, so it seems that there was a Variety, which is a big entertainment magazine here in the States. They reviewed Big Boss and said it was a bit mindless. But still, who was doing anything like Big Boss back then? I think that kind of made Bruce a little pissed. And maybe he wasn't too happy because that was an American magazine that reviewed it, and he was about to come out with Enter the Dragon, so he didn't want that kind of shit in there.
Kind of alters the trajectory.
Right.
Hey, I'm getting bad reviews from.
And so now and also they mentioned that his brother Robert, his younger brother, was studying in the U.S. So it's possible that his younger brother saw that review and sent it to Bruce. And then the second paragraph for June 28th is, Lee was a contender for the role of Lieutenant Hip in The Man with the Golden Gun. Had he done the movie, The Man with the Golden Gun was shot in Hong Kong. It's actually I love watching that movie because I'm so nostalgic for Hong Kong in that time period. Yeah. It's one of my favorite Bond films.
It's my second favorite Bond film.
Yeah. Can you imagine Bruce Lee in a Bond movie?
Oh, it would have been so awesome.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, you should.
We
It's
sh-
that's
we
the one
should
with
re-
Hervé
we should-
Villachez, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
We should do
Christopher
a-
Lee's the bad guy.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome.
Let's
one of
just
my
watch
favorite.
it
One of my
on the
favorite.
KFG.
I would
Yeah.
love that.
Had he done the movie, this would have been a way to accentuate his interest in ordering a gold Rolls Royce. Apparently, at the time of Bruce Lee's death, he had ordered a Rolls Royce, but it never came in. Ray could imagine the headline had Bruce went from being in talks to actually signing, from Golden Harvest to Golden Gun. Jun's Cantonese name is Lee Chun Kao, so Bruce was hoping that Ray wouldn't lose face if there was a headline that went from Lei Siu Leung to Lee Chun Kao. I don't know, like, it sounds like I when you say like, and maybe Ray would feel this way, meaning Raymond. I always think it's weird that in the blog they call Raymond Chow Ray, like he's my buddy.
Yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? It's like if people
What's
call
up,
me,
Ray?
it's like when people call me Al, and I'm like, okay, I don't know. It's just weird, like because it's
Dude,
Raymond.
dude,
Okay?
Yeah, if you be my bodyguard, I can be your long lost pal.
Yes. I can call you Betty. Betty, when you call me, you can call me Al. I by the way, I grew up in Jersey.
Yeah.
So my tightest boys, like you met my old friend Lou from that time.
Oh,
he,
yeah.
he still
He
calls
calls
me
you
Al. Yeah, he calls me Al, right? So they're like there's a select few of my Jersey
Right.
like friends that call me Al.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Great. We got to go back and visit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, this I don't know. This paragraph just seems like the writer's kind of saying like, yeah, and Raymond who would like, it's kind of saying he knows the inner thoughts of Raymond Chow and Bruce Lee and stuff like that. And that's where I go, that's the problem with history. I'm okay with the, talking about, this is when the review came out and blah, 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 blah. And that he was a contender for the role of Lieutenant Hip in The Man with the Golden Gun. But then he goes, had he done the movie, this would have, and then the rest just seems like he's kind of riffing on what would have been as if that's a fact. And that is the writer's interpolation right there. By the way, Man with the Golden Gun has, she goes by Yin Xiu or Yin Kao. Like she is the landlady from Kung Fu Hustle.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's in The Man with the Golden Gun back then. She was much younger back then.
And
And then
is
let's
something.
see. Yes. So anyway, that's June 28th. So now we go to Thursday, July 5th. July 5th. Okay. See that timeline ticker to the 20th, right?
Ooh, day after the 4th.
Yep. So Lo Wei, who also directed The Big Boss, claims that Bruce threatened him with a knife in a Golden Harvest screening room where Lo's wife was present. Bruce later counteracted that he wouldn't need to kill Lo with a weapon.
Right.
His ownership of it indicates a wary awareness that his physical condition was too weak to intimidate. The cops never found it because Linda had hid it, thus no arrests. 5 days later marked the final televised interview that Bruce gave. In the last and lost TVB interview, the funny thing is they're all lost. Interview with Ivanhoe, he indirectly chastises Lo. Wei had ties to the mob, as Jackie Chan attested to in his 1998 book, which spilled the beans on Lo being a top member of the Sun Yi On triad, which was headed by Charles Heung's dad, who's Heung Hwa Yim. Heung Hwa Yim, Charles Heung's father, was the founder of Sun Yi On. And they're like the two main triad groups. Triad groups in Hong Kong is really two main ones in Hong Kong.
Like the Bloods and Crips?
Yeah, and they have splintered into many subgroups, very similar to how martial arts start and then they kind of faction into different groups, but they all kind of, at least in Hong Kong, trace their roots to kind of two main ones, Sun Yi On, the other one's 14K. And everyone else is kind of a subsidiary of those, right? And they rule New Territories town, Tuen Mun, where Bruce filmed the first scenes of Enter the Dragon. That's where the Qingshan Monastery is. That area there was supposedly Sun Yi On territory. What that means is not exactly clear. So this is a big story. The threatening Lo Wei with the knife. Because of course Bruce Lee fans would be like, oh, why would he need to do that? This story is confirmed. Okay. Linda Lee, I believe, even admitted it in her first biography, saying it was not his finest moment. Andre Morgan, who worked for Raymond Chow, and he's also been on Bruce Willow's podcast. And Andre Morgan confirmed it. So, I mean, for people who want to go, hey, why would Bruce Lee do that? It seemed that Bruce Lee did that. Now, when you layer on top that he had a pretty intense cocaine habit at this point, he's nervous because Enter the Dragon is finished, not yet released. So he's got that anticipation of, is it going to bomb? Is it going to come out? You can imagine. Now, this is also obviously my speculation. But when you read between the lines here, and you don't have to agree with me, it's totally fine. I think it's pretty clear that Bruce is really nervous about whether Enter the Dragon is going to hit or not. He really hates Lo Wei, although at this point, you know, he should not give a shit about Lo Wei. Lo Wei was some 2-bit director he made 2 movies with, and Bruce is on to bigger and better things. Gives a shit about Lo Wei, right? But Bruce couldn't let it go. For
Cocaine
someone
is
who
a
was,
hell of a drug.
yeah, for someone who was all about like, you know, I have no fear for the enemy in front of me, and these people don't bother me, and you know, like he could talk it, but there was something about Lo Wei that just got in his craw, man, and he just like wasn't going to let it go. Now, for people who don't know, Bruce Lee had a belt buckle knife. All right. There are many photos of him wearing it. Most famously at the airport with the TWA in the background. And you look at Bruce's belt buckle, and it's kind of an oval shaped belt buckle. And it has this like thing that looks like a pin that goes up and hold it. That's the blade. You pull
like
it
a
out.
spade.
Yeah, you pull it out and then basically it kind of goes in between.
there.
Yeah, it fits in there, right? So it wasn't like a knife. It was like one of those things. Now, of course, people could speculate like, you know, they say stuff like, oh, why would Bruce Lee need a bodyguard? Why would Bruce Lee need to carry a weapon and stuff like this? Because those I find, those kind of comments come from people who just don't understand how the world works, all right?
It's
if you are the baddest fighter in the world,
right.
Okay, and you're known for being a bad fighter,
right?
Okay, sure, maybe if you're in your 20s, you might have a kind of a whoever comes kind of attitude. Yeah. But if you're constantly mobbed wherever you go,
Mike Tyson had
bodyguards. Right? Floyd Mayweather had bodyguards, right? Has bodyguards still,
right?
Yeah, you can't get near Floyd, right?
You can't get
because it's a matter of, yeah, maybe you have the fighting skill to, you know, hit someone off of you or whatever. But do you want to have to be doing that on a daily basis? When you go to the store, do you want to have to like always be getting into it with people just because you're a badass? This is like what people who are children in their minds kind of think like, why would Jackie Chan need a bodyguard? Why would Bruce Lee need a bodyguard? Because they want to be left the fuck alone when they're just out and about.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're crazy people out there. There are people out there who can come at you with weapons and come at you with knives when you are not looking. All right. So you have a bodyguard there. It's like a buffer to make sure these things don't happen. It has nothing to do with not being a tough guy or whatever. I mean, these kind of things happen, you know, and they may be times when there's specific threats and you amp that up. I mean, I know some very famous Wing Chun Sifus from the 90s where there were like some very contentious things going on. They came to seminars with bodyguards, not because they didn't think they couldn't beat this guy in a one-on-one fight, but because when there's a specific threat, you don't know how that threat's going to be carried out. And it just makes sense. So this whole idea, like, why did Bruce Lee need bodyguards? I'm like, are you 14 years old? All right.
No.
So you know what I mean? I always find that kind of like a little whack, right? So the what the blog writer here is kind of insinuating is Bruce's physical condition is clearly deteriorating in these, especially after the May 10th collapse. There are very few photos from May 10th into June into July of Bruce Lee. Few and far between. You can find them if you Google like Bruce Lee's last photos. There's some photos of him on the sets of different movies, and what you can see is he's still shirtless in some of those photos, but you see that he's losing some of his muscle
volume.
All right, of course, because he was taking steroids every day, right? According to certain people, right? He was taking diuretics. Okay, so Bruce is losing muscle, so he keeps taking diuretics. Oh, it was the cortisone. Okay, so stop with this bullshit. All right, his kidneys. Look at the autopsy. Everyone tell you his kidneys, but it's like her emails. But his kidneys were Where's the kidney failure in his autopsy? Show me. People keep saying it. It's like a thing that people want to be true, so they just keep saying it. And it's like, show me in the doctor's appointments. Show me in the autopsy. Where's this freaking kidney failure? Where? Okay.
That Bruce Lee died because he lost his faith in our Lord Jesus Christ.
Obviously.
That's
All
why.
right. Yes. All things are possible through faith.
Through
Steroids. Through faith and steroids, right? Except apparently curing childhood disease. So anyway, so here we go. The thing is, what's weird is like the author here is insinuating he's becoming a little bit more frail. So maybe he doesn't feel like he could just rough up Lo Wei. So he needs to threaten him with a knife. But the thing is that belt buckle that Bruce wore, there's photos of Bruce wearing that in 72. So it's not like he was just starting to wear that now.
No.
All right. So where the blog writer kind of, I believe, shits the bed is that I think Bruce, because he was being mobbed everywhere he went in Hong Kong, kind of had that with him. We also know the story about when he showed up to to his old alma mater, St. Francis Xavier. He had a freaking Derringer gun in a paper bag where he had Bob Baker there. So I think he was a little paranoid, perhaps because of the cocaine. But some of that is also rightly so. We can't just say, oh, he was paranoid because of cocaine and because his body was frail or whatever. Like, you don't understand what it's like to be as famous as Bruce Lee, living in a extremely densely populated place like Hong Kong. Think about how populated Hong Kong is. Now imagine you are as famous as Bruce Lee. When you come to Hong Kong, just walk down the street. Yes, Hong Kong's population is obviously much larger now than it was in 73. But still, just imagine walking down the street and everyone there knows you and they're looking at you, and everywhere you go, you would start to go, oh shit, because everywhere in Hong Kong, small spaces, small rooms, small restaurants.
It's tough to jog.
You are basically kind of trapped wherever you go in Hong Kong. So I don't buy into this. Oh, now maybe, was Bruce a little weaker, a little bit more frail, maybe not quite in the same physical condition as he was a year prior? For sure. I don't think it takes a lot of speculation when you look at Bruce's photos in those final weeks. He did not look strong. I think the final photo of him, I don't know if it's been verified that it's the final photo of him, but it's in his garden at his Kowloon Tong home, which is also on the Ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu Tour.
Oh, yeah.
He's doing like his lat spread, and he's very soft, and he's not quite as juicy as he was. And I don't mean juicy by steroids. I just mean like looking good.
Right.
And it was before. He almost has a little bit of like imaginary lats syndrome. The guys who walk like this. All right. Like when I walk through a door and pretend I'm too wide, it's imaginary lat syndrome.
Right.
He's kind of like really struggling to make and lats were like one of the most impressive things on his body. Right. So I think everything was kind of taking a toll. I also think after the May 10th incident, because it was so horrific, when you go back and I didn't talk too much about it in this series here because, like I said, I did an entire episode on the May 10th shit. It was horrific. When you read like what Dr. Wu and Dr. Langford, what they said about how they had to hold him down and the convulsing and everything like that. I can't imagine, even though Bruce Lee said, the doctor said he was as fit as an 18-year-old, I can't imagine that Bruce wasn't like, I don't think I have much left.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of, these are really rough months for Bruce Lee. And of course I'm speculating here. This is my interpolation, but I will admit it. But based on the few photos we have, based on what we hear from other people, and it just seems like, I don't know.
It just seems like he had so much turmoil up here.
Yes.
It's just like,
It's
going nuts up there.
Absolutely.
Man.
So, but this incident with Lo Wei has been confirmed. And by the way, I think Andre Morgan even says he was the one who hid the knife. Here it says it was Linda. I think Andre Morgan himself, who worked for Golden Harvest, they hid the knife before the cops got there. And then, but then again, at the end, of course, this sets up a narrative. Bruce had threatened Lo Wei, and Lo Wei has connections to Sun Yi-on. And Sun Yi-on was founded by Heung Hua-yim. And Heung Hua-yim's son, Charles Heung, later married Betty Ting Pei. Oh, it's so clear. Except one thing.
Makes total sense.
Okay? This incident happened July 5th. Okay? Bruce died of cerebral edema, brain swelling, of which he had an nearly identical incident on May 10th. But this thing happens on July 5th. So now Lo Wei, with his triad connections, finds a way to make Bruce Lee die of the same thing that happened to him less than 2 months earlier.
He's really, really crafty like that. So.
It's why. All right.
Well,
okay. Like, because Lo Wei feels insulted, he's going to literally kill Bruce Lee or have Bruce Lee killed and put his own career as a director in jeopardy. Imagine they found out. He gets thrown in jail. For what? For beef. Lo Wei is an older guy. He's an asshole, but he's not going to do something that stupid. Like, yes, you can make a case for it, but look, when I hear Bruce Lee conspiracy theories regarding his death, I go, oh, please. I could do an entire episode.
Oh, on the theories.
No. I could actually, given the facts that we know, create a way better crafted and way more interesting Bruce Lee death conspiracy that would be completely fake. But I could point to a bunch of real things and said, see, that's exactly the way it is. Because you can reverse engineer so many conspiracies by using all these things that were going on. You could, what's a beardy's not quite that good.
No.
He who shall not be named.
He who shall not be named.
How
who
dare
shall
you?
not be named.
Yes.
And by the way, Bruce Lee's death, aliens.
Obviously. So, Dre, did you fix your hair?
Yeah, I look great, right? You like it?
Incredible. It's a bit Hobbit-like, though. Okay, so we're now at Thursday, July 12th.
Right.
All right. Lee demands Raymond Chow to invite Wong Ngok Chong, who was the editor of Galaxy Pictorial Magazine, a Golden Harvest publication. Ooh. Lee is livid about an article written by Wong. You notice a theme here, like especially in these last months, like there's articles coming out about Bruce Lee and Bruce is off the charts pissed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very clearly, if Bruce could have been transported into our modern time with YouTube comments and stuff like that, I think he'd be off the rails pissed off.
Oh, yeah.
Ray, again, calling Raymond Chow Ray, still throws me off. Ray tries to assure Lee that he bore no ill will. Again, what's interesting is, well, maybe they'll say it here. Lee draws out his small knife from his belt and places it on Wong's neck. Lee rebukes him by making a metaphor about his knife being similar to a pen before rebuking him for claiming that Ray groomed him. What the hell does that even mean?
I know, right?
His anger gradually subsided after Ray helps Wong to put in a good word. After the misunderstanding is cleared, Lee shakes hands and with a visibly shaken Wong. In theory, Lee should have been murdered on Friday the 13th. Okay, here's where I start to part. Here's where I start to part ways with the blog author here. Okay, in theory, he should have been murdered. By whom? You have an out of control celeb. Name a couple celebs who went out of control. Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay Lohan. Okay. At what point did any producer want to have them, perhaps in the back of their mind, but this idea, no, oh man, this guy's off the rails. A celebrity acting off the rails is the most normal thing. All right, Charlie Sheen. What about any other off the rails celebrities? Who went off the rails?
Man, there's so many.
Yeah. I mean, there's other, like, what's it, like Jonathan Majors?
Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
Whitney Houston, yeah.
So, I mean, this idea like, oh no, they need to be like always inserting. So that's like what I love about this blog post. They get all the dates and the timeline stuff really well. What I don't like about this blog post is as you get closer to Bruce Lee's death, it's like, and there he should have been killed. Should have been killed. Shut the F up. All right. So apparently there is another knife incident. So this is a thing that Bruce is doing a lot now. And notice that he talks about his knife being similar to a pen. And I told you that belt buckle, like it basically looks like this, right? So yeah. All right. So now we go to Saturday, July 14th. By the way, can you imagine if Bruce died on Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th.
All right.
Wow.
Okay. Jackie claimed that the bowling anecdote took place 6 days before he learned that Bruce died. What's fascinating to note is that Bruce didn't bowl despite wanting to go with Jackie. This is a famous story. I don't know if you've heard this. Jackie Chan told this story that he saw Bruce, like, I think near the Peninsula Hotel. And Jackie was going to go bowling. Obviously, Bruce Lee knew who Jackie Chan was because Jackie was a stuntman, had worked on most recently at that time Enter the Dragon with Bruce, and it was also in Fist of Fury. I think those were the only films that Jackie did with Bruce. He was not in Big Boss, wasn't in Way of the Dragon, but he did, two. So he was a stuntman that Bruce Lee knew very well. And then, he has the story that he saw Bruce in those kind of final days, and they went bowling. But Bruce sat down. He didn't actually bowl, just Jackie. Yeah, but Jackie said that he felt like a big star walking into the bowling alley with Bruce Lee. And he talks about Bruce wearing those like high-heeled boots that he wore back in those days.
Oh, wow.
And then, Jackie went bowling, was kind of showing off. And then at some point, Bruce was like, okay, I think I'm going to go now. And then he walked Bruce out, and then Bruce went into a taxi and left. And that was the last time Jackie Chan ever saw Bruce Lee. So Jackie Chan says it was 6 days before Bruce Lee died. I don't have any reason to doubt that this story or something similar like this
why would he make something?
No, I don't think he made it up. I'm always a little weary when someone's like, that was 6 days before he died. Because when you don't know in advance that something big is going to happen, and then so much time has passed, like, unless you have a daytime or like now it's much easier when sometimes I want to go like, when did we do that one thing in Hong Kong? I can go on my phone. I can see I can see the exact date and time. Right. Now. But back then
I can look through my texts.
Yeah, exactly.
And just find stuff out.
But back then I'm always a little leery of people saying like it was for sure it was very close to Bruce Lee's death. And one example is Tony Lau Wing. Lau Wing was an actor who was in most of Bruce's films. Actually, he was in all of them, I guess, except Game of Death, which was incomplete anyway. Lau Wing was the big boss's son that Bruce kills with that punch, and then he looks at his fist. That's Lau Wing that he kills. Right. And then in Fist of Fury, the next movie, Lau Wing is just a background character because these were just studio actors. So in one movie, they have fight scenes. In the other movie, they're just in the background, right? In Way of the Dragon, Lau Wing was one of the waiters at the restaurant. Yeah. And in Enter the Dragon, Lau Wing is one of the tournament fighters, and he gets defeated by John Saxon. So he was pretty regularly in Bruce's films, and he was very fond of Bruce Lee. I have a friend who did an interview with him a number of years ago for some Bruce Lee related project, and then asked, Lau Wing, like, who is Compass Mentis? I mean, he's not like going senile or anything like that. He's still all there. And said, what was it like going to Bruce Lee's funeral? And he said, I was too sad. I didn't go. And Lau Wing is at Bruce Lee's. He's in the Bruce Lee funeral footage. He's literally at the funeral. And he was like, I didn't go. I was too sad. He had forgotten that he had gone to Bruce Lee's funeral because maybe at some point he had told himself like, I was so sad, but I made myself go. Yeah. I was so sad. And then I was so sad. I couldn't go. Mm-hmm. And then things change over time. And then there's a great book.
He knew he was sad.
There's a great book called Subliminal, written by a guy named Leonard Mlodinov. It's a Russian name. I can't pronounce it. And it talks about the problems of human cognition and remembering and how the brain misremembers stuff. And it's kind of a bug of
that never happens.
Well, because you don't remember it to begin with. You can't misremember something you don't remember to begin with, right? And how like sometimes over time, your memory of something gets infused. Because let's say an incident happened a number of years ago. You remember being there. You remember the facts from your perspective. But then you've had the conversation multiple times with other people, and they've chimed in. And what happens is there's this little creeping effect. Like sometimes a fact about that event that your buddy saw, but you didn't see it. Right. Your friend mentions that then gets into your narrative. Yeah. But you're now saying your version of what someone else saw that you didn't see. And then over time, you start to solidify. Because when you do something, when you first go through an event, you just do it, right? You go through something, it happens, you deal with it, right? It's over the years that you start to create a narrative about what that meant. Like, what was the lasting effect? Like, for example, our Van Damme story in Hong Kong. When it happened, it was all just like, oh, dude, it was Van Damme, and he totally blew us off, and blah, 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 and we laughed about it, right? But then over time, we've told the story a few times, and it's now become like a thing where we almost imagine what was going on in his mind, what was going on through our mind, and then like how the whole thing came to be, and then what that entire incident means. And everything about that layer of meaning
Mhm.
and narrative and story is something our brains have added after the fact. It wasn't, it could be close, like the facts could be close,
Mhm.
but our interpretation of those facts and what it means.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes we embellish the story, like a little detail here or there to make it a little funnier.
Yes.
And although that
Yes.
was an objectively very funny
It
thing, like
was-
your laugh in the middle of that restaurant was freaking hysterical. And that's the problem. And then over time, someone else told you something about it, and then this, and then that creeps in. And then when we're telling stories from 30, 40, 50 years ago,
Oh yeah.
the idea that you are saying it exactly the way it was, if there wasn't a video there to confirm it, it's probably, you could run the experiment now.
Mhm.
You could film a conversation that we have, a specific conversation we have for the purpose of how are we going to remember this in 5 years? And I talk about, let's say I write 5 bullet points, we talk about it, and that's it. We never talk about it again. And then in 10 years, we go, you remember when we did that one experiment? Let's talk about what happened. And then we would go back and watch that video and we would be completely fucking wrong. Completely fucking wrong. All right. And that's why I'm always like,
I would love to do
with
that.
these like this kind of like, you have to be very careful with adding this stuff in.
The
So
Ghetto
with-
Boys came up with a perfect song.
What?
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Mine's playing tricks on me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great song. Ghetto Boys are awesome.
You're
I
right.
guess the thing with this book, is it available as an audio book? And do they suggest that you only listen to it when you're asleep?
Why? Because it's called Subliminal?
Yeah.
No, as a matter of fact, I have an extra copy of it.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yes.
Hello.
And I can, what's funny is, and I'm actually looking at it right over there. I was going to give it, it's one of my favorite books. I was going to give it as a gift to someone. And I had a conversation with that person. And that person then told me before I gave it as a gift that they had the book already. And I already wrapped it.
Oh, that's
Do you see that wrapping paper right there under the dad's jokes? Take it. All right. It's literally a copy of that book. It's yours. All right.
Oh, what?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite books. It's you open it up. You can show it. Here. We'll show the audience here.
That's wild.
This thing's been wrapped for years.
Impromptu gift from the KFG Al Richter.
I love
Subliminal.
Yeah.
How your unconscious mind rules your behavior. All right. Leonard Mlodinov. All right. There you go. It's
There
right
you
there.
go.
So yeah, it's a great book. It's a really great book. But it's also why I don't put a huge amount of stock in like, yeah, no, this is and Bruce was feeling this while this was going. You might know some of these things, but there's this creep of narrative and story and polishing up the story over time that you always have to be a little mindful of. So anyway, so that's why Jackie's bowling story. Was it exactly 6 days before he died that we could say it was July 14th? Maybe, maybe not. It was a Saturday. That would be a good day to go bowling, would kind of make sense, but
Okay.
whatever. So Jackie claimed that the bowling anecdote took place 6 days before he learned that Bruce Lee died. It's also 6 days before he learned that Bruce Lee died, not 6 days before Bruce Lee died. Might have been a day before
could have-
Jackie learned that
Could
he
have
died.
been
Right?
2 Saturdays before.
From the latter's point of view, Bruce was brooding in a way that suggested he was plotting his next move, as typed in a book titled Dying for Action, The Life and Films of Jackie Chan. Many of the bowlers were bowled over by the fact that Bruce was there. In an interview, John Little learned that Jackie liked to go to bowling alleys because the triads never frequented there. He stopped going to the pool halls because that's where the triads would congregate. By this time, Bruce had a reputation for being paranoid and bad-tempered, yet Jackie gets an easy ride. In the book called John Woo Interviews, the titular subject said this about Jackie Chan while discussing a late 1974 production called Countdown to Kung Fu, released in 76. I liked him so much. He was pretty quiet, but I truly loved his talents. I thought he was not only good in action, but he had a good sense of humor, and he was pretty tough. He was not afraid. He could fall on rocks with his bare back, and he didn't mind getting cut. Another thing I found was some kind of loneliness. He didn't talk to other people much. No one had discovered his real talents, that kind of loneliness. So, yeah. And Jackie, when he tells a story, kind of like he mentions, and of course, is this something that he's kind of added into the story, or did this happen? I don't know. I'm not saying Jackie's lying. I'm just saying people misremember stuff.
Mhm.
So even if someone is trying to honestly recount a story, you always have to be a little mindful about those things. He said that when when Bruce got into the taxi, or maybe right before he got into the taxi, he turned to Jackie like as if he wanted to say something.
Oh.
And then he didn't, and then he just went in.
Oh.
And for me, it's almost like, well, it's kind of a film director and producer. It sounds like a movie beat, like it's that last scene in Lost in Translation. What did Bill Murray whisper? That kind of thing, right? It's kind of like what would Bruce have said? Like he was saying, Jackie. Bruce was going to say, Jackie, you will be the next star after me. All right. By the way, Jackie's Chinese, I suppose his stage name, because it's not his real name, is Sing Long. Long meaning dragon. Sing means like a successor. So almost as if he was the successor to Bruce Lee, right? But Sing Long is not his given name. Okay, so we are almost out of time here. So let me. Yes, you know what, Dre? I think we're gonna have to do a part 4.
Wow.
Yes, because July 16th, quite a bit going on. We have notes for July 17th, July 18th, July 19th. And then we have the crazy events of the day of his death. So I think I'm going to plant the flag right there. And I think we're going to do a part 4. Yes, Mikey.
I was going to say, I think it's about time to, make your ending statement.
My ending statement?
Your catchphrase.
And that's all
I've got to say
about.
You never tell me to say it. I always say it on my own. I don't need to be prompted. Since when in all the years of the podcast you need to tell me to say my catchphrase? This is ridiculous. I know what I'm doing.
He's the producer.
I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm a professional.
Oh,
okay?
No.
Professional martial arts instructor. All right? Professional. Not really professional talking to the mic guy, but I know how my podcast works. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of content. Support us on Patreon or here right on YouTube. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
Okay, and 1, 2, 3, clap. Andrew's got the clap. All right,
clap.
There we go.
Andrew's got the clap.
Okay, you ready, Dre? Let's do this
can
again.
I just say this one more time? Andrew's got the clap.
Yeah, you can say that as much as you want. Wow.
One take
Professional.
Jake.
One take Jake.
One take Johnny.
Thank you. You're wearing a 2-take Tommy. Or a 3-take Tony.
Theodore.
Well, you told us we were pressed on time. So
Yeah. Or a 5-take Frank.
5 take. Right.
7 take Stephen.